everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Thrive with Asbury Seminary podcast, where we bring you conversations with authors, thought leaders, and people just like you to help you connect with where your passion meets the world's deep need. This week on the podcast, we're talking with Mrs. Lisa Espineli Chinn, leadership and ministry coach and former National Director, International Student Ministry, InterVarsity USA. In this episode, we talk about her story of coming to the U.S. as a grad student, her work with international ministry, and ways we can intentionally engage with other cultures without setting foot on a plane. She's also written several books about navigating the joys, challenges, and transitions that come with cross-cultural ministry. We'll link to all of those in the show notes, so let's listen. So I'm really grateful that you could take the time to be on the podcast today, Mrs. Chinn. I'm just so excited about our conversation.
Yes.
And so I want to get to know you a little better. So if you could tell me a little bit about your story. You grew up in the Philippines, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me, like, growing up in the Philippines, what was that like? How you came to the U.S.?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, growing up in the Philippines, one of 7 children, so you could just imagine what that's like. I'm 7, there's 7 and I'm number 6.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so in a Filipino setting, you have honorifics. You never call your brothers, older brothers and sisters by their first name. It's always preceded by an honorific. Ate for older sister, kuya for older brother. So because I'm number 6, so everybody else ahead of me have the honorifics. So that's just kind of what it is to grow up with the proper respect that older people are given. So it's a very respectful, recognizing people's place in society. So you respect elders, you respect teachers. There's proper protocol, as it were, to those who are elder, those who have more status in the society. So the Philippines was occupied by Spain for about 400 years. So there is the Spanish influence. 85% are mostly Catholic even today. And then in the early 1900s, Americans came, 1898 in particular. So there's the American influence on top of the Spanish influence. So somebody had described it as 400 years in a convent and 50 years of Hollywood. Okay, so that's kind of, you can imagine what that's like.
Like one extreme to the other.
Yes.
Yeah, so how did you then come to the U.S.?
The opportunity came to do graduate studies. I had already been on staff of InterVarsity Philippines, and I felt like I needed more training. So I asked around. I asked one of my mentors, who was from the United States. She's Asian American. She's Chinese American from Hawaii. And she was a graduate of Wheaton. And she said, well, you should consider Wheaton. So that's how it started, considering grad school. So God opened the door, provided the funds. So I arrived in the fall of 1970. That was quite a while back.
Yeah, so did you come by yourself, or did some family members come with you?
No, by myself. It was international student visa. It was a student visa that I had. So you're not allowed to bring anybody.
Okay.
Yes, so you come on a student visa that's strictly for you, and sometimes it's single entry. That means you can never leave the country while you're a student. So you come and then you return home.
Oh, wow. Yes. I would imagine that's very hard. What was it like for you?
Well, it's not hard when you think of the opportunity to travel is really rare. To go to school at that time in America is an honor, a gift that you don't want to squander. So, hey, I'll take it anytime.
Yeah. I saw in my research about you that your parents' work had influenced you a lot in your life choices and your work. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yes. My parents lived the last 25 years of their lives in the United States. So they migrated. They became American citizens.
Really?
And so because we are a very close, tight family, and my parents were tailors, so they modeled to me what hard work was, because you're raising up 7 children on an income that's not stable. There was no salary as such that you pick up every 2 weeks, It was dependent on customers coming in to have their pants made, whatever. We had contracts with the military, so that was steady. We had tailors that we employed. So next to the other people, we were well off.
Yeah.
But next to other people, we were not.
Right.
So being poor is really relative, in many respects. So, their influence, their impact is that of hard work and faith. They really believed in who God was to them at that time. Their faith grew over time. They understood the gospel and received Christ in their lives when I was just a few months old.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So through the efforts of Filipino missionaries who were part of a Presbyterian church.
Okay. So then, am I interrupting your story?
No.
Yeah. So how did you then come to know Jesus?
Yes. I think it was in that very fertile ground of my parents' faith. So it wasn't alien. It wasn't even repulsive. Sometimes kids experience their parents' faith negatively. But my own personal commitment to Christ came through a friend in high school.
Okay.
And she just asked me if I was a Christian, and I was surprised. I mean, in the Philippines, everybody's a Christian. Why is she asking me this? And I was curious. And then she explained, have you, asked God to forgive your sins and asked Jesus into your life? I mean, and I think she was just doing the best she could to share the gospel with another friend. But God used that, and I did. Went home and knelt by my bed, doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And asked God. But so that was the awakening, as it were. But it was softened. The ground was softened through my parents' faith. And a church was established in our home, actually. It started through a Bible study in our home that became a church. So I grew up with that. So the ground was fertile for that. And so my own journey started with, as far as making a commitment to Christ through that friend, and growing through InterVarsity in college, and after InterVarsity being on staff.
Yeah. So you said, I thought you became involved with InterVarsity when you were older, but it sounds like you were already involved before you came to the U.S.
Correct. Yes, I was actually involved even in high school. In the Philippines, we have high school work.
Okay.
So I was involved in high school and involved in college. And then after college, I joined staff. So it was just all those years, very formative years.
Yeah, so that's had a big influence on your life too. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So when did you first become interested in cross-cultural ministry? Is that the best way to word the question? I'm not.
Yeah. Maybe, I think about that and say, when did I even get interested in other parts of the world?
Yeah.
Might be a good start, because there were 2 books in my home. Okay, here's a poor family. My dad reached 3rd grade. My mom reached 7th grade. Okay, so that's the extent of the education of my parents. So our walls were not filled with books. They were filled with fabric. Okay?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Because they were tailors. So I remember 2 books. One was the Bible, and one was a dictionary, Webster Dictionary. It was thick, and I remember just flipping those pages, and the pages that I enjoyed looking at were the colored ones, and these were flags of the world.
Oh, wow.
So perhaps, and I think about it, perhaps something was planted there about the world that we're not alone, and there are other people from other parts of the world. And then, of course, we're used to Americans coming as missionaries, and so that was kind of part of my world. But the cross-cultural component was perhaps because my degree is in foreign service.
Okay.
And I had to take Spanish and French. So already, we've got to relate with people of the world in order to be good diplomats if you're working to represent the government. So that's where it all started. But as far as anything formalized, perhaps more when I went to grad school.
Okay.
At Wheaton.
Okay.
Because my paper was on how to offend Filipinos without even trying.
Okay.
So that's all
fascinating.
About cross-cultural things. Yes.
Yeah. That wasn't on my question list, but I want to hear about that. So what did you discover and what did you say?
Yeah, I mean, well, shame is very prominent. Amor propio is your self-image. And so you're being careful not to put them on the spot in a way that would embarrass them.
Oh, I see.
So you don't call out their mistakes publicly. You don't put them in an uncomfortable position that would put them in a place where they have no options or, how to respond. And gratitude is very deep-seated value. In my language, Tagalog, we have utang na loob, which translates debt of gratitude. So the greatest offense is one who has been helped but does not express gratitude.
Oh.
So, I mean, perhaps the American, you get help and you say thank you, right? And that's gratitude. That's enough. But in my culture, there's more to just thank you.
Yeah.
It will mean even your family members will remember the good deeds. So we would be grateful to the parents who helped, to the people who helped my parents at one point. So that's carried down. My parents will tell us stories.
So, So the gratitude is passed down through the generations.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So the gratitude, the respect. So those are some of the things that are deep-seated. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very interesting, which leads me to another question that I didn't send you ahead of time, so I hope that's okay. Yeah.
We talked about this.
Yeah. What is the best way to learn about other cultures? Because I wouldn't have known that at all. And so I think about other people I come in contact with from different cultures. What is the best way to learn about their culture so that I don't unintentionally offend?
Right. Well, nowadays, I mean, you just Google, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, during my days, you've got to either access the library, interview someone who is from that place. Now you just ask Google, or Siri, how do I do it in Japan? Or what's the best thing not to offend the Japanese? I think it starts with assumptions we make. And there are three things that I would say. We either assume they are the same, and therefore, I never see you as different. And therefore, the assumption of sameness will always tell you will never make a mistake because they're like you. Okay, they're like you in some respects, but not like you in other respects. So you approach it with an assumption of sameness, fellow human being, the shared humanity that you have. You also approach it with an assumption that of difference. She's another mom, but she is from Iraq. She's another mom, but she's from Kenya. So there must be something different there, although moms around the world may share the same basic things of values, but assumption of difference. So I will approach it wanting to learn that difference. So there is that curiosity. And then the assumption of uniqueness, because I can assume that every woman in Saudi Arabia is not able to speak up and say something of their own independent thinking. Well, when I met my friend from the Middle East, okay, she was not that. She said she drove back home, okay? So I have to be prepared to be surprised by the uniqueness of the person and not make assumptions. Although a general landscape is good to kind of hang your thoughts, but to be willing to be curious and willing to be surprised.
Yeah. And willing to change, I would say.
Yes. And that's the part that is the educational component, is when we're curious and we're learning, then transformation happens. You change your mind about certain people or certain assumptions you've made.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah. So I want to back up. When you came to the United States to Wheaton, I'm sure you experienced some culture shock just coming. Would that be right? Yeah.
Yes.
So what was that transition like for you, and what do you wish you would have known?
Well, there was no pre-departure training,
Right?
They said I'm going to be going to a cold place. My older sister had gone ahead of the family to be an exchange intern in nutrition at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. So she went to that cold place. And now I'm going to Chicago, and we didn't have a chance to compare notes. All I know is there's snow where I'm going. So preparing yourself for that is just imagining what it's like to be in a cold place. Where do I do that? In a country where you pull out your sweaters when it's 75 degrees or 80 degrees. I mean, this is the hot tropics. So I opened the refrigerator. At that time, you have, freezers that are not frost-free. And I looked, and the fish that's in there was frozen, and I'm thinking, that's where I'm going to be in Chicago. So I can't imagine myself in that place. And sure enough, you go with zero temperature or below zero. So preparing means imagining what life is like to come to the United States. Even if we're familiar with the American way, as it were, because of the movies, because of books we read, and the American influence in the culture, it's still different being there yourself. I remember arriving in LA and just overwhelmed by how big, how huge everything was.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the streets were so big and huge. The trash cans, by the way, were huge. What do they put in there?
Exactly, yeah.
I said I would fit in one of those. But anyway, so just spatial, space was one, because you come from a country that is smaller but more crowded, okay? And then you have this spacious place. How people relate with one another was another adjustment of, you cannot just assume that they'll be your friends. It doesn't come as naturally, and you have to make an effort to, I just assumed because I was a guest, being an international student, that people would ask me questions. And as soon as I discovered that they were not as curious, I have to turn this around. So I was the one that became curious.
Yeah, taking the initiative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Waiting to be hosted will not take me very far. So I hosted. I was the one that asked the questions. I was the one that took the initiative. Yeah.
Is that, if I can interrupt for a minute, is that normal? Like in the Philippines, if somebody who is not Filipino came, would it go the other way? Like the hosting be more to the guest instead of the guest having to take the initiative?
Well, at least, cultures change. The Philippines has changed too. But at least there is an assumption, that that person is from a foreign place, obviously foreign. And so put your best foot forward, or be nice. Essentially, be nice. Because their experience of you might be the conclusion that they will have about the whole country. So there is the sense of, I'm carrying the country's reputation if I mistreat. But, over time, people are not as conscientious about that, but at least I grew up with that.
Yeah.
And so I carried that value of being hospitable, being curious. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you shared, I listened to a talk that you gave at Urbana about being asked on a date by a guy, and you kind of related that to
Right.
learning about the cross-cultural experience and being aware of customs or different things that you didn't know. Would you share that story?
Right. I think it was probably in a smaller seminar, because I don't remember sharing it in the big convention. My professor, my theology professor, was the one that I worked for. So everybody got to have a job, limited to the campus, because if you have my student visa, you cannot work outside.
Right.
And so he became like a father to me, and was very kind. But anyway, so when my first summer on campus, this one guy asked me what I was going to do that weekend. And that question is a question, right? What are they going to do this weekend? So I responded with my schedule, and I had things to do. I said, I said I'll do laundry and do some reading, and okay. And then Monday came and he asked me again how my weekend was. Then I just reported that my errands, my chores were done, and I think Thursday rolled in, and he asked, what are you going to do this weekend? And I said, I'm going to go visit my friend in Chicago and maybe do a paper. So he didn't say anything. Okay. So for me, it was a question seeking information, right?
Right. He was just really curious about your weekend.
Yes, and that's kind of nice, like Monday he'd ask how it was. I said, great, I had a wonderful time with my friends. But then, and like I say, when crossing cultures, watch for repetitions. Okay, this is a repeated pattern. What am I missing here? Number 2, look for a mentor who can explain. What is going on? So I went to my professor, and he said, well, what's going on here, Dr. Horn? This guy asked me this question. So I repeated the scenario. And he looked at me, and he said, Lisa, like, did I do something wrong? What did I do wrong? You didn't know? I said, what? He was asking you for a date. I said, what? He was? I thought Americans were direct. Why didn't he ask me directly? And my professor said, well, not in this case, So he was asking me for a date, but he was not being direct about it. So how do I respond? See, I already have my mentor, right?
Right.
I was observant of repetition. So you ask for a recommendation. What's the culturally appropriate way to respond?
Right.
And he said, well, when he asks you again, say, what you're doing this weekend, nothing in particular. What do you have in mind? Oh, that sounded like a good answer. So I repeated that. Nothing in particular. What do you have in mind? So I waited for Friday to come, but he never did. He never asked.
He never asked again?
No. After learning my line. And when I tell that story, you could hear my husband in the back saying, praise God.
Yes.
Things could have turned out differently.
Yeah.
But that's just how it is. You don't know what the person is asking, and you learn by your mistakes, and you figure your way around. And, so they're not direct. My assumption was tested, and I was wrong. And how do I learn? And, you got to be resilient. I mean, you're crossing cultures. You cannot always respond like I'm a failure. You just have to bounce back and say, okay, let's try and breathe, right?
Right.
And say, okay, let's do this again. So that was kind of a good way to learn by our mistakes, because you will learn a lot crossing cultures. And sometimes it's through our mistakes, and sometimes it's through other people's mistakes.
Right. Right. And sometimes that can involve some hurt, I would imagine, too,
Yes.
even though you're trying to be resilient. How have
Right.
you seen God redeem your story as you've made mistakes, bounced back, had mistakes, other people made mistakes against you?
Yes. I mean, you collect those narratives. Okay, so now I have a story, right?
Right.
If it turned out differently, it would still be a story. I mean,
Right.
you accumulate over time stories that will add to either the richness of your experience or God's grace in your life. Okay? When you make mistakes, how willing are you to quickly forgive? Well, remember, there's the shame factor, right?
Right. So it might not be that easy.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. You might just feel like, oh no, I made a blunder. I will never be seen again. You've got to recover and say, well, if it's not a major mistake, it was a cross-cultural mistake, and you can recover from that and learn from it and add it to your repertoire of skills, of things that I say, okay, I'll make sure I don't repeat that. Or if people ask advice, don't make assumptions.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to know how you and your husband met.
Oh, okay. Like I told you, are you ready for a few hours? Yes, well, I was single, obviously, and attending a conference that representing InterVarsity USA. I really didn't want to go to that conference because I had a heavy summer. I directed a conference, and I asked my boss to be excused, but he said, no, I want you there. So being Asian and obedient to my supervisor, I went, not realizing that it would change my life, right? So sometimes it's good to be Asian and submissive to your supervisor. So anyway, and he was there. He was one of the hosts of the conference. And he said he spotted me at the registration line. And I told him, I didn't even see you. And he said, you were wearing batik. And so it stood out. But anyway, he never said anything to me until the end of the conference, where he asked me, together with other single people, if they wanted to look around Colorado Springs, Colorado. Okay. I said, sure, I'd like to. And after that kind of field trip with those who were not flying that day, he asked me if I wanted to go for a ride. I said, oh, okay, sure, So we went for a ride. But already, you just don't say yes to someone you were bored with or had negative vibes,
Right.
He already was, he was not impulsive. He was gentle and a gentleman, I said, sure. So we went for a ride. But when we came back to my dorm in Colorado Springs, he asked if I would go on the backside of this dorm because there's a beautiful view of the moon. I said,
yeah.
Wow, I like to see the moon, So I went, and at that point, he just said, he said, is it okay if we pray? I said, well, nothing's wrong with praying, right? So I said, yes, let's pray. And he essentially asked God, if you're leading us together. I said, oh my gosh. I said, what is this man saying? Is he indirectly asking me? What is going on?
Indirectly asking through prayer?
Right, exactly, So I said, so I started laughing because I was so nervous. And that was it. At the end of the prayer, I asked him, are you always this bold with women?
I mean, yeah, nothing like putting you on the spot with the Holy Spirit.
I know. Yes, exactly. I mean, you can harness all your spiritual resources, with me there. What can I do, Anyway, he said, no, I'm not this bold, only when the Spirit leads. Oh, wow, okay. And so at the end of the conference, we ended up committing to communicate, to see where this relationship goes. So I flew back to Washington, D.C. He stayed in Colorado Springs. And pretty much, we met in May, and by December, we were married.
Oh, wow.
Yes, that fast. I mean, if he had his way, we would have been married, like in July or August. I mean, he had no clue how long it takes.
Yeah, he was for sure.
Yes, he was for sure. I mean, and of course, it's the first time I met him. But of course, I found out he knew my sister and he knew other people I knew.
Okay.
So when I came back to my sister's home where I was staying and living with her, my sister asked me if I had gone out. I mean, if how the time was. So I said it was great. Then I said, I met Leighton. Oh, you met Leighton? And the next question she asked was, did you go out with him? I mean, where will she ever get that clue? But of course, he was the most eligible bachelor, apparently, that my sister knew. So I blushed and I said, well, actually, I did. I hope this is for good. I just didn't know. But the short of it is we got married in December, and the Lord blessed us with 3 kids.
Oh, lovely.
Yes, daughter, son, and daughter. And they're all adult kids, married. Now I have 5 grandkids.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's an exciting time of life.
Yes, it is. And the thing, too, Heidi, is sometimes when you feel like God has forgotten you in this area of life, to keep being faithful. Being faithful as a single person, not always thinking that marriage is something that you are working for or that's your aim in life. Your aim is to glorify God.
Yes.
As a single person or as a married person. And I had to learn that, to be faithful in whatever God has called me, in every, state, to be content.
Yes.
Even if there are times where God, come on, I'm getting older, I'm hanging out with college students, But it really just reinforced for me how God provides, how God hears our prayer. And even before I met him, actually, at that same conference, I had gone into the chapel and asked God to recommitted my life to God, because it was a conference for international students, reaching international students. And I actually said, Lord, I offer to you my singleness. You take me anywhere you want. And I go out of that chapel, and who would be standing at the door?
Leighton.
Yes, Leighton was there like, God, did you just hear me say something inside? And what, so I was a little confused, but God, in his own good, kind way, was saying, here is how I would like you to consider a provision.
Yes.
That you will, thank you for offering your life as single. And I think you have to come to that place.
Yes, I agree.
Don't you think?
Yes, I
come
do.
to that place that you're willing to be single or married.
Yeah, either way.
Yes. Because that sets a very calm and settled tone, rather than being, restless and complaining and comparing.
Comparing is a dangerous game.
Yes. So anyway, thank you for asking.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for sharing. So why cross-cultural ministry? Because you've ministered, I think, on, if I have this right, every continent except Antarctica. So.
Well, when you travel all over the place, it's just because my work takes me there, whether I'm giving a lecture somewhere on international students and how they make the transition, or what is included in discipling the international students who come to our countries. Afghanistan, I came there as part of a Youth with a Mission before I went back to the Philippines. So that too was a different experience altogether. But when you're able to travel, and this is what I really recommend, is at this time and age, when you can travel anywhere, take it.
Yes.
I mean, if there's a study abroad available on campus, take it. But even then, don't look too far. Look here also, because the world has shrunk.
Yes.
International people are in our backyard, on our campuses. So open your eyes to them rather than just looking at the exotic places and you never see who's ahead in front of you. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, that makes a lot of sense. So how can we, what are some specific steps that we can kind of put into our minds to practice engaging in cross-cultural ministry or just cross-cultural interactions, whether it's, like you said, whether it's in another country or our next-door neighbor?
Yes. My chapel talk this morning, I talked about the gift of hospitality, that hospitality at its best, based on my reading of Genesis 18 with Abraham hosting the 3 visitors, unbeknownst to him that they were the messengers of Sarah being pregnant, is that we need to open our eyes to our surroundings.
Yes.
It is colorful. It's that, being aware of where international people are, being intentional. Part of it is intentional displacement, where you put yourself in the most uncomfortable place, like worship in a African American church, or, well, Chinese restaurant doesn't work.
No.
Eating at a Chinese restaurant is not intentional displacement. But you know what I mean, is putting yourself in their place.
Yes.
Okay? So opening your eyes, deliberate displacement, curiosity. What is life like for them? Curiosity that doesn't make them like museum pieces, but
Right.
curiosity because they're a fellow human being.
Right.
When my friend, like I said, from Iraq came with her kids, I just, wanted to know more. What is it like, And she had twins, and I put the girl on my lap and taught her English, Her first English words were with me, and, later on, she did her PhD in English literature in England.
Wow. You had a great influence on her life.
You never know who you will put on your lap. But it started, Heidi, with a willingness to make room for other people.
Yeah.
I think sometimes in our own way, desire to survive or desire to keep our life simple, we close in, just me and my friends.
Yes.
It's a very selfish way of approaching life. And there are risks, and it's messy at times, but once we make room for others, it's the richest experience you will ever have.
Wow.
Truly, and right here in Kentucky, right here,
Yeah.
There are opportunities.
Yeah. Because I'll just confess right now, I have unintentionally closed my life, to keep it simple, to keep it less busy, and you can't do everything.
Right.
But I'm realizing I've made it much smaller than it needs to be.
Yes.
So what are some ways that somebody else like me,
or
me, because I need to do this too, can engage right here in Kentucky?
Yes, I understand there's an international friendship program in Lexington, and some Asbury students go there, and it's helping with some of the Syrian refugees. We have a high rate, a good number in the state, but simple steps like that, where you meet a need, a felt need, a very important need. If they can communicate in English, that's a real service. And be open to how God will transform you.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, we define life within our own terms, make it as simple and as limited. And when you choose it that way, then I feel like it's being poor by choice.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yes, so if you begin to say, God, help me to make room, because our heart is elastic, it can expand. And once our heart is really expanded by God's love for us, there's space for others.
Yeah. I think a lot of times I've held back because I've been afraid to reach out, because I've been afraid of making a mistake. Because I know how in quotes, my world works. So I'm not as prone to, I make enough mistakes every day, but I'm not as prone to making a big blunder or offending people.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a common fear, Heidi. But what I say is, once you overcome that, just take a risk, because the risk is really lower than the gain, because you're afraid of making mistakes. But the people who are still making it to this life in this country have already made a lot of mistakes, more than you have. So by you crossing that line and saying, I'm here, I want to learn, approaching us as a learner, okay?
Yeah.
And for me, if people make mistakes, I have a lot of grace because, well, what do you expect? I mean, this American kid has never left home. Of course, they don't understand a lot of things, right? And if they make blunders and they are willing to admit and ask for forgiveness, of course, as a foreigner, I would. I will not be harsh and, that's not how I would approach it. So what I'm saying, Heidi, is, ask God if this is something that God is kind of stirring in your heart, put some legs to it. Volunteer, okay? And maybe just being an English conversation. That's the lowest level. The international, at least in my world, international students are really the low-hanging fruit of mission.
Yeah.
They will drop on your lap, literally. That fruit is overripe, but the opportunity is there. The lowest shelf you can reach.
Yeah.
You're just speaking English with them.
Yeah.
And you're enhancing their ability to communicate in this culture. So that would be the initial steps. Look for opportunities that are comfortable at your level, and then increasingly, add more as your heart expands.
Yeah. Do you think going on mission trips is a good thing to, engage cross-culturally?
Oh, definitely. It depends on the kind of mission trip.
Okay, yeah. Talk to me about that.
Yeah.
Because I've heard mixed things about mission trips.
Yes.
Which is why I was asking, like some places you go, I've heard that they will, mess something up so that the Americans have something to do when they get there. So
yes, it has to be the right short-term mission trip. My good friend who is a professor of anthropology, Miriam Aidney, says that sometimes those short-term missions are like Mac missions. McDonald's and Mac missions, it's just transporting an American product.
Right.
And it's not as effective. It's good for just, good image or something.
Right. It makes us feel good. Or the people going.
Yeah, we don't do short-term missions to make us feel good.
Right.
Okay? But sometimes that's how we do it because we feel guilty. Guilty because we're wealthy, guilty because we haven't done anything. But a good short-term mission should be, really, to me, is mission education. It does more to the people going than to the people they're sent to.
Okay.
So I would have very low expectation in terms of first-timers. This is an opportunity to open your eyes to what God is doing, to test your assumptions, to try out something you've never done before, to take risks. And to really, it's your laboratory where you can learn things. Okay?
Yeah.
Like I said, you don't have to go there. They are here, right?
Right.
But if there's an opportunity to do that and be intentionally displaced, if you're the only white person sticking out of the crowd, good for you. So, you know what that feels. How do I cope with this? So it's good when it's done well, when the attitude is that of a learner and of a guest. I think just because we have a visa or no visa needed, we arrive as if we own the place.
Right.
No, we don't. We arrive as guests. Guests have to ask permission. Guests are limited. Guests don't exercise power on others that is not appropriate. Guests bring gifts, yes, in many cultures, yes?
Yes, they do, yes.
Yeah, so approaching it that way and having a good debrief and re-entry should also be there.
Okay. Yeah, talk to me about that.
Yes. Standard of excellence of short-term missions. They have put a list of 7 points, I believe, of the standard of excellence. And that includes a good re-entry.
Okay.
So what happens is everybody's is focused or interested in, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to Slovenia. I'm going to these other places. So everything is focused on the pre-departure, prep, raising money, prayer. Everything is on the pre-departure. And of course, you plan the on-site. But the return, the or post-arrival or arrival is not given as much thought.
Right.
And I often say it's the hidden side of orientation.
Right.
And I'm the advocate to say we need more. And I'm actually speaking on that tonight at the university on what we need to remember about reentry, because it's not welcome back. It's not welcome home. It's more welcome back.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about that, because our listeners won't get to hear your talk tonight.
Yes, okay. So I thought they might want to come. No.
But we'll air until too late. So, tell me a little bit about that. Yeah.
Well, it's more in terms of how much you've changed while away from home.
Okay.
How do you process what you have seen, especially if the culture is so different from the culture back home here?
Yes.
Like you went to Haiti. Wow, that is staggeringly different.
Right.
Okay. And the kinds of people you worked with. So you come back, those, maybe even 2 weeks or 3 weeks, really changes your world, rocks your world.
Right.
Puts it upside down, because, wow, how can people live this way? Might be your question. Or where does God exist in this place?
Right.
And then you meet others in that same culture who know Jesus and exhibit such joy. How can that be? I come from the affluent country, and I don't see people with joy.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. I went to Colombia, South America last year, and went to a church service down there. And they, like the part of Colombia I was in, I think all of Colombia, it's much poorer than anywhere in America. But I've never seen happier people. And so I was really disappointed when I came back to America.
Yes.
Because my church service didn't look anything like that. We all look so sad to be there sometimes. And I'm like, we should be so happy.
Yes. So it makes you wonder, and that's good, because once you leave home, you come up with a new set of questions.
Yes.
You assume certain things, and then leaving home and going on this short-term mission trip will really challenge your assumptions and give you a whole new set of questions, but a whole new set of eyes to see the world. Then you come home with a new advocacy. You become the informal defender when people come up with just very swift, sweeping conclusion. Oh, those people from that country are like this. But you say, but that was not my experience. I was there. Even if it was 2 weeks, I met the most wonderful people. So you put another spin to what people may have thought and were generalized about negative conclusions about other people. So so those things need to be processed. And there is a grief component as well, depending on what the experience was like. You come home and you miss the people, you miss the experience, and you want to repeat some of those experiences back here, and you can't because it's so different. So there is that sense of loss, and you go through grief. Some people go through big, heavy depression as well on the reentry side. So it's very important that you prepare people for reentry and help them to have the needed skill to understand what's going on.
Yeah, because it's kind of reverse culture shock to come back here from most of the places that you visit. Yeah.
And the reverse culture shock, because people don't prepare for it, is harder.
Yes.
Because, of course, I'll have culture shock going to Colombia, but I'm just going back to Wilmore.
Right, and I know what it's like.
Yeah, we think it's the same, but we've changed, even for those 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Yeah, and that's why for those short-termers, God gives you the opportunity to continue that enlarged, elastic heart, by looking for opportunities to serve with people who are different from you, whether through, services like the International Friendship or international students. Invite them to your home. That is so low shelf, so easy. I mean, and learn from them. They're just, it's home away from home.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's so good.
Yes.
So good.
So you're going to volunteer now, Heidi? No.
Yes, we'll see. I want to do something different and make my life something different because I want my life to matter, and I don't think it matters in the way that I want it to matter right now.
Right. Yes.
So it doesn't matter for other people.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. But I appreciate your attitude about it.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. So, how would you describe this season of your life in ministry?
So I've done a lot, right?
Yeah, you have.
I started.
And I don't think we even talked about the half of what you've done.
No. What I'm thinking is, like, wow, God, you are just so good to take me, where I've been, because none of this would have been my design. I may have desired certain things, but nothing like what God has given me. So I'm really, really grateful. I started staff work at 19. And, I had this life to live that I could serve and live and serve in another culture. I have to learn how to do it here in the U.S. and also hold my first culture together. So it's not giving up everything, but I feel like I live in three cultures: my Filipino culture, my American culture, and kingdom culture.
Right.
So you traverse those three places, and kingdom culture trumps both.
Right.
And so it's wonderful to be able to do that, to be an advocate to others from other cultures, to explain certain things, to be, I trained to be working in our equivalent of the State Department. My undergrad was in foreign service.
Okay.
So technically I could have been an ambassador, but in reality, I'm an ambassador, right?
Right.
Ambassador for Christ, yes. So the season of life is that season where I can, it's a convergence of the things that I've learned and the people I enjoy coming together. So I mentor young leaders from InterVarsity. Okay. It's wonderful. And I have others that I mentor outside of InterVarsity, but to be in their lives in this season of their leadership development. I wish I had mentors, when I was their age, but to walk with them and to just kind of glean from my own experience what it's like to lead as a woman, to lead as a woman of color or minority woman, to lead with confidence, not with arrogance or with a chip on my shoulder. What does it mean to lead with a servant's heart? I mean, all those things that, I get to access in this season of life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, what is it like to lead as a woman and a minority? What has been your experience?
Well, it depends if you are leading in a place or a company or an organization that is mostly white and mostly male. That's different, and it's uphill, right? In InterVarsity, at least my experience is that it's a very empowering place because we believe in God giving gifts to people, and that you have your unique gift.
Right, and you're still with InterVarsity?
Yes, okay. As a mentor. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was director for international student ministry for 14 years. So I finished that and passed that on, but now I'm a mentor the last 5 years. So the challenges of addressing whether structure or attitude in a way that is not, I don't want to be the angry woman all the time because you lose your audience when you're just angry.
Right.
Yes. I think for me, it's speaking the truth with confidence, with a voice that is prophetic, and a voice that is your voice. You're not mimicking, copying someone else.
Right.
So it's me. This is my experience. And how do we help people change their minds? And empowering women to be able to manage up, to help supervisors with what it takes to understand women, especially women with young kids,
right?
And what work looks like for them, because we have those in InterVarsity working part-time. So you you advocate. So for me, I was in a good place. But there are times where I'm also challenged, like going to other places where women are not as elevated in respect or acceptance.
Right.
Yes, so it's a great season of life, and I get to enjoy my grandchildren too.
It sounds like a great season. Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, you've written several books, really, and so I want to talk about that briefly. So I have that you've written Think Home, a Reentry Guide for Christian International Students, Back Home, Daily Reflections on Reentry, Reentry Guide for Short-Term Mission Leaders, Coming to America / Returning to Your Home Country, and Friendships with International Students, Crossing Cultures Here and Now.
Yes.
So do you want to talk about each of them? Or
Well, they all have different histories. Think Home came about because I was at a conference with staff who are working with international students, not InterVarsity. This was International Students Incorporated. And I just happened to ask them what they did to help international students on their reentry, going home on their return. And this was decades back.
Right.
So things have changed since. I just want to make sure, that's clear. And they said, well, Lisa, we give them a party. And I said, that's great. That's a good start. What else? They thought some more and said, oh, yeah, we give them a gift. I said, good. A lot of the world, value the gift giving. So I kept pushing. I said, what else? They said, oh, yeah, and we pray for them. I said, great. Always pray for your students returning home. And then I kept pushing, what else? And they kind of hit the wall and say, what else is there? That's it. So the meeting ended, but I went back with my newborn, started writing on a napkin, tissue, because it was lunchtime, all the things that I thought were important because I returned home after my education.
You had that experience.
Yes. I said, well, this would help students, So that's the background of Think Home.
Okay.
Think Home is over 300 questions of generic nature of what it is to face change, what are examples in Scripture of those who have returned home, and what changes you have undergone, and all those. So it's a workbook that is generic, not just specific to those returning to a specific country.
Right.
So that's the background, yes. And it's interesting, the early beginnings of it, other missionaries found the book helpful for themselves returning to the U.S.
Okay, yeah.
They just took out other chapters, obviously. So I felt like, that's a good tool, and we've revised it since, and, we put a lot new materials also. So that's one. And then the other thing is Back Home, which I wrote in 2014. I've always wanted to be on the other side of the reentry. I prepared them from here going home.
Right.
I said, I wish I could be there to receive them. What would be something that would help them in that transition? So Back Home is that 14-day devotional, 30-day devotional, just to kind of help them process. Each day there's a short scripture, question, then reflection.
Yeah.
So they can write.
Yeah, because it's so easy to return and then just try to get back into your rhythm without thinking about anything. Yeah.
Exactly. And it will address issues of, even how do I make it in this new culture? Because like you said, why is my culture like this? Why couldn't it be a little bit of the joy from Colombia could infect my church? Yeah, so that part, and I wrote it with short-term mission people in mind, study abroad people as well. So that part. And then the Coming to America on U.S. campuses, I wrote that without any Christian reference by design, so that it can be easily distributed for new international students coming in. And the flip side of it is returning to your home country. And I've tested that with my PhD students. As far as English, I wanted it to be as simple as possible so that they can just grab it. So ESL, English second language, or English as a foreign language, could learn using it, improve their English as well. So that, and then